Hey guys, this is Paul, and welcome back to my channel. I am an ISTJ, and here I'm going to talk about ENFJs, but unlike my previous video, ENFJ-The Emotional Bulldozer, which got quite the gamut of responses, which, far from offending me, I actually was quite amused by some of them, including the most recent one I got from Elizabeth Williamson that said, "Your conceit is really quite astounding." Naturally, the question that comes into my mind is, how am I astounding? Or how am I conceitful? I mean, if I really am so conceitful, then wouldn't it be nice to tell me how I'm conceitful so that I'm not in the future? That just has never made sense with negative commenters. Why wouldn't they tell someone how to improve? Which is ironic, considering that that's exactly what I'm about to talk about right now. ENFJs, the pioneers of communication. Thank goodness I didn't blow it this time. So, ENFJs live in the world of people possibilities. I quoted that directly from Personality Page, by the way. And so ENFJs, their natural mode of interaction is they love being around people, but they love being in control and they love creating social situations that promote the harmony of the entire group. Being secondary introverted intuitives, they're going to be naturally in tune with what people are feeling and pick up on subtleties. But unlike the INFJ, where that's going to be the first thing that they pick up on, they're going to notice that after their feelings have, taken action. They're EJs, after all. And EJs are often stereotyped as being kind of controlling and sort of act before they think. So as a result, ENFJs, because they have a tendency to be impulsive, they need the most alone time of the extroverts. That doesn't make them the most introverted of the extroverts, though. That would go to the ENFP. But the ENFJ does need to learn how to show a little bit of restraint, because oftentimes they'll put themselves into too many social situations, and that will end up draining them and making them really unhealthy. But I'm not here to talk about the unhealthy ENFJ. I'm here to talk about them on a normal, positive, healthy day. And I actually have a lot of good things to say about them. I'm going to use a friend of mine as the basis, but the problem that I made in the previous take was I was getting a little bit too personal, and she's already easy enough to find, shall we say. So I'm going to change her name, although she already knows who she is if she's watching this because she already gave me her permission. We're going to call her Jane. And Jane is a girl that I met 7 years ago. Haven't seen her in person since, but we've kept in touch fairly recently. And I've come to know that when she has taken the test, she often gets ENFJ, but sometimes gets INFJ or is borderline on the extroversion introvert. But the way that I can tell that she comes across as ENFJ as opposed to INFJ is, for one, because she seems like she's able to be a lot more practical than the average INFJ is able to be. Now, that's not to say they aren't practical. My girlfriend has more practicality than most ISTJs I know. ENFJs, they tend to be very in control of themselves and their environment. So, with INFJs being some of the least structured of the judging types, ENFJs are much closer to the top. They are they have very controlled sentences that are perfectly spelled out, and they often like to be grammatically correct because they want to be able to get their point across. ENFJs are known as being the most effective communicators. So naturally, leading with extroverted feeling, they're going to try, really, really try to make a good impression. And sometimes that's going to be like their main focus in life, is dominant extroverted feeling is going to be needed to be feeding on the emotions of others first and foremost. So rather than getting totally selfish, ENFJs are going to try to create situations that'll create the most harmonious outcome. So another friend of mine who's also ENFJ, she has expressed enjoyment of creating social gatherings or taking previous social opportunities that were more damaging to people's feelings and trying to create a more peaceful environment for people to be honest and talk about their faith in a non-confrontational, non-aggressive manner. Because ENFJs typically don't enjoy being aggressive, but sometimes it kind of sort of happens because they lead with extroverted feeling, and that's a judging function, which unfortunately, as much as the critics are going to hate me for it, typically tends to be an act before you think function, and so as a result, it can lead to being impulsive. But like I said, on a normal day, my ENFJ friends can be quite pleasant to be around. Sure, they can get into rambling tangents if they're not completely healthy with their extroversion, but overall, they are extremely sensitive to people's needs, and they're very good at adapting to the situation. I know another friend of mine who is ENFJ that I thought she was ISTP when I first met her because she did such a good job of sort of having that chameleon effect where she thought this would be the best way to approach this social dynamic. And so she came across that way to me, and so when she finally revealed that she was an ENFJ, I was completely shocked. But then my suspicions were confirmed when she said, well, I picked up certain readings from you, Paul, and so I sort of changed my personality to sort of feel you out and figure out what was going on. So ENFJs have their tertiary function of extroverted sensing, which you've heard me talk about extroverted feeling and introverted intuition enough. So I think it's time to talk about the tertiary. Now, from my experience, extroverted sensing is the need to be hands-on, and boy do ENFJs love doing that. ENFJs, they typically enjoy being coordinators, as a lot of ENFJs in my life, both the ones that I like and dislike, have tended to be. They love putting things together, they love organizing social events, but they also have an adventurous side, which is where the tertiary extroverted sensing comes in. ENFJs, they have somewhat of a thrill of the unknown, though being judging types, they're more likely to plan out a reasonable hypothetical alternative as opposed to just sort of leaping into the vast unknown like, say, an ENFP might like to do. ENFJs are very carefully coordinated as far as how they present themselves, how they talk. I might have said this already, but it's worth repeating. My ENFJ friends, they hardly ever slip over their words. They hardly say words like or They're typically very in control, very easy to, well, at first glance they're easy to understand, but sometimes it can be hard to understand when they're primarily talking with their emotions. And because they lead with feeling, it's a little bit harder to comprehend than, say, when an INFJ would do it, because they lead with intuition. So while it may not be the same as an ISTJ leading with introverted sensing, they're at least leading with an introverted perceiving function. But the ENFJ is leading with an extroverted judging function. So when they talk about emotions, it's likely to be kind of sort of, I guess, a little bit intrusive from my point of view, because like they might get so hooked on this fixation of what they want that I might have to say, whoa, 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 slow down. Do you have any basis in actually feeling this, or is there a realistic possibility that maybe that might lead you into a destructive decision? That's not to say that ENFJs are stupid. On the contrary, ENFJs oftentimes are very intelligent and have a great way of being able to present what they know in a way that doesn't often come across as confrontational per se, but they can come across as manipulative if they really have read a person so well that they use that to their advantage, and then they end up getting what they want because they're extrovertedly feeling how the other person is going to be appealed to, and that's how they're going to take advantage of the person. Thankfully, most of the ENFJs in my life are not like that. They do have a tendency to overreact, but thankfully, when they overreact positively, it's not so much emotional vomiting. I might have said that in the previous take, but now that I think about it in context of my friend that gave me permission to use her in this video, she doesn't really emotionally vomit all that much. She's more of just like giving a controlled, contained response to what I've just said. Like if I say, hey, guess what? I just went to this conference and I had an incredible time. My ENFP friend would probably say, yay, that's so awesome. Tell me all about it. That's so amazing. She's more going to be like, oh, congratulations, Paul. I'm so glad you had a really great time. Would you care to tell me about it? So as you can see, they're both really excited, but the ENFJ has that contained, smooth sentence structure that the ENFP is lacking. Not to say I don't like ENFPs, but they do sometimes let the words just flow without thinking about how they flow. Whereas ENFJs hardly ever do that. They put a lot of effort into planning and organizing, and so as a result, their sentence structure is going to be organized as a result of their tertiary extroverted sensing. That need to experience life, jump into the thick of things, and then remember it. Now, I talked a lot about the inferior function, which is introverted thinking, in my previous video, and I mostly talked about it in the context of when the ENFJ is in what's called the grip mode, meaning when they're so under stress that they revert to their inferior function as the dominant. So when an ENFJ uses introverted thinking, in my experience, is more of like a way to try to justify an unexplainable emotion. Like in the case of another friend of mine, I've noticed that when someone is just really pushing her buttons a lot and she doesn't understand why it's being done, she'll often try to find a way to make it work. And she'll try to say, this has to be the case. This is the only reason this person could possibly do something so horrible. And that'll be like a defense mechanism to prevent herself from getting hurt further. Now, granted, it takes a lot of maturity for an ENFJ to get to that point, but typically when they're not in the grip, that is typically when you would see introverted thinking take place the most, in addition to the fact that they don't typically express their logical perspectives out loud, preferring to either suppress it or not think about it at all, and just say, well, you know what? If everyone got along and if we observed what the best possible outcome would be, there would be no need for logic, because logic doesn't take into account what people are feeling, right? I could be wrong there, but that's my personal experience. Now, before I get going, I just wanted to talk about how ENFJs might be a bit difficult to deal with ISTJs, even when they're in normal mode, not completely out of control like my ex-friend was. So, first off, we lead with a perceiving function, so it might be a little bit difficult to adjust to the constant need for the outpouring of expression. We might want to sort of take things in a bit first with our sensing, and they're going to be feeling their way through life without thinking about it first, necessarily. That might cause some conflict. In addition, because introverted thinking is all the way down on their function stack, it's difficult to comprehend having logic be so black or white. Like, because ISTJs have secondary extroverted thinking, they're of course going to base their decisions on logic, but they're going to think about it first through their sensing. But it's also not going to be so go-to that they forget to analyze. In the case of an ENFJ, it's pretty much all or nothing. Either feelings or meh, logic. That's a bit hard to grasp, but presumably a healthy ENFJ knows how to develop themselves enough where, like my friend, they can put themselves in a situation where they'll try to think about what the wisest alternative will be. And that might not be the same as logical, but that doesn't necessarily make it wrong. On the contrary, my friend has made a lot of wise decisions based on how she feels that have really worked, like how she dresses, for example. But I promised I wouldn't talk about modesty, but suffice to say that I see her as like a role model in how most females should dress. But I won't get into it further because that's not my forte. Anyway, I hope I covered all the bases. This was a really hard video to make because I felt like I had already covered things a lot in my previous one, but I think people just wanted to know that I don't hate ENFJs. That one particular friend just really did a number on me, and even ISTJs have feelings, and I needed to express them in a constructive way. So without further ado, since my computer is rubbing it in that I went past the 15-minute mark, please let me know in the comments if there's anything I forgot or you'd like to add from your personal experience as an ENFJ. And until my next video, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.